Hey, good morning, Jose. So, day two of our flight sim video series. Yesterday was more of the overall tutorial of my setup and how I kind of fly the flight simulator. But today, I kind of want to focus on the issues that I run into and maybe some tips and tricks. You had some feedback and some comments, questions about certain items that I think maybe I can help answer. And so today I'll focus on three things. One is the Beyond ATC with AI voices and your own voice as a pilot. This actually adds another level of immersion that I think is kind of fun. I mean, I'm still trying to get used to it. You do have to get the phraseology correct, otherwise the controller will end up yelling back at you and not acknowledging your commands. And then, like I said on Messenger, the other item was to kind of go over StreamDeck a little bit more in detail today. And what I can do is I can show you how you could use just the StreamDeck to replace all three of these. You really don't need the PDC or the autopilot if you could actually figure out how to use the StreamDeck, and it really is an all-in-one solution. So again, I recommend it to start. I mean, well, you already have the autopilot, which is great, but you know, until you can get your hands on, say, the EFIS, we can go over how to do that using the StreamDeck. Okay, and then we'll see if we can actually figure out how to use these two sliders for the brightness panel if you want. However, I will say, if you do get the StreamDeck, you actually don't need to use the sliders because you can use this guy here. So we'll go over this more in detail, but the overhead panel, these three knobs here are what you'll end up using. BRT, which is brightness for the display unit, and then if you want to switch, you just toggle between three. Right now it's not working because my plane's not loaded up yet, but I will show you that once we get everything started. So stay tuned. Today's going to be more about tips and tricks and how to get around certain issues. Okay, you did note that I was flying JAL yesterday, and what happened to my ANA? I usually try to switch it up. Sometimes I fly JAL, sometimes I fly ANA. So today we'll actually do a little bit more aggressive flight in terms of GPU. So yesterday I chose, two airports that didn't really tax the system too much, but Haneda and Osaka have some pretty dense scenery. So I tend to try to stay away from that right now. I mean, you'll notice that the FPS is going to drop significantly today, but we'll use ANA, and we'll do a flight from, let's see, Osaka to Tokyo, which is one of my favorite routes. It's always good practice, and it's also pretty short. I mean, that one takes about an hour, so we'll go with that. Go ahead and load up the flight. So as we mentioned yesterday, we're going to use SimBrief. Let's see. So I already have several flight plans saved, and that's another thing you can do with SimBrief, which is nice. I mean, for routes that you use most frequently, you can actually save them like this. And I just pulled up my typical one that I use, which is the NH32. You can name them with actual flight numbers from real world if you want. And then just go ahead and load these guys in. Actually, what I already did for today's flight, I already changed the routing. Okay, so you'll see today's date here, and this is on UTC, so you'll have to do the UTC conversion to your time zone. Was that minus 10? Maybe 7? It's East Coast, so GMT minus 10, I think, or 11. Anyway, let's see. So let's go ahead and import the route, and should move the map around like yesterday. Okay, finish loading. Let's tap here. We'll zoom into Kobe. Zoom in further to Osaka. And the one thing when you pick your gates, it's helpful to know, in advance, like from a realism point of view, what gate your airline actually sits at. So if I'm flying JAL, you know, I want to be typically on the left side over here because that's where they park in real life, and then ANA parks on the right hand side of Itami. So if you get your terminals wrong and you're injecting live traffic using Beyond ATC, which could use our FSLTL models. I'll get a little bit more into that today about the AI generated aircraft scenery, which is another advantage of using Beyond ATC. What will happen is you'll kind of look a little odd amongst the other aircraft that are sitting there. So what I will do is I'm going to fly ANA, so I'm going to pick where I normally see the 737 fleet, and that's usually here on the corners, like at gate 11 or gate 12. But because we want to do a nice proper pushback today, let's go ahead and do 11. Okay, so we'll set that as our departure, and I'm gonna have to keep the skies clear, otherwise I think the FPS is gonna drop pretty bad. I think the rest of everything here is set up correctly, so let's go ahead and just try this. Let's go ahead and fly. So another thing that I wanted to point out yesterday that you probably didn't see on the video is that if you install GSX for all the ground handling stuff, that will put a huge toll on your initial boot up for Flight Simulator. So not only this part when you're actually loading a flight, but also when you're just booting up Microsoft Flight Sim to start. What used to take maybe 2 minutes to start up Flight Sim might end up taking like 6 to 7 minutes. So a lot of users of GSX have actually had frustration over having to wait such long times every time you reboot, especially if your sim crashes often, and mine used to. So it was just a pain just to wait for 6 to 7 minutes every single time you needed to reboot into Flight Sim. So that's just something to keep in mind. You might actually have better performance if you have a higher spec CPU. So give it a try. I mean, if you end up buying it, I would definitely give that a try to see whether or not your performance is actually hit on the initial startup. There are some tips and tricks on the internet on how to make your GSX boot time faster. So as you can see, my flight is taking really, really long to load. What it's doing is it's actually having to load in all of the GSX scenery libraries for things like the airport, the ground handling, all of those like equipment, the characters that are being loaded, like the baggage handlers, whatnot. So it will actually put a load demand on your boot up time. That said, coming back to the little tips and tricks, one thing that a lot of the users have actually mentioned is that to turn off as many of the supported airports inside the GSX setup before you actually launch, and that helps cut down on the number of airports that your flight sim is actually having to load in. So Osaka and Haneda are very, very two big aggressive ones, and so my scenery takes up a lot of time to load. The GSX also takes up a lot of time to load. It's not something that I can avoid, but it is what it is. So while we're waiting for this to finish loading, I think we'll go into a little bit more about the Beyond ATC. And so I've got the thing opened up real wide over here. Normally I have it kind of shrunken down like this. You could actually shrink the menu down to fit what your needs are, and I don't really need it to be too legible like while I'm actually flying, because I'm doing mostly listening, but it is dynamic, so it will stretch like this depending on how big you make the window. A couple things that I will kind of add as pointers when you're using this: it is also another FPS hog, and so you may want to set your target FPS to be a little bit higher, so that you'll sacrifice the AI voices as a trade-off to maintaining FPS on your flight sim. Oh, sorry. As you can see, I also have my pop-up manager set up to auto pop-up and place my dials every time I start a new flight. So that part you don't have to keep manually doing every single time. You can have it set to auto pop-up. Let's go back to Beyond ATC. So yes, I would actually set my target FPS to something like 45 just to start, and see if that actually works for you. If you're finding that everything is fine, you can try dropping it to 30, and then try to get more traffic in exchange. So let's see, we go down here in the push to talk. That's the thing that I'm going to demonstrate to you today. So I've got the trigger on my Thrustmaster on the back side of the left here to be my microphone trigger for talking to the ATC, and we'll demonstrate that shortly. The other thing that you can see right here where it says traffic mode matching and the model matching priority. So you can have up to 3 different AI traffic models that you can inject. And I didn't mention this yesterday, but I strongly recommend you download FSLTL if you haven't done so already. That will replace all of the kind of generic yellow and green and red airplanes that you see parked inside Flight Simulator, which look like very generic aircraft. They don't even look Airbus or Boeing. But you will want to find FSLTL, and that is right here. Where did I put it? Oh no, I know. I thought I had the boot up here. Yep. So it's called fly-by-wire, FSLTL, and what this does is it injects the real-world aircraft from actual live data that you would get from actual flights. They also contain all of the airplane models that you'll need. And so once you just download FSLTL, the base models, you can use the injector to actually inject aircraft dynamically right now. But if you do this and then you also use the Beyond ATC at the same time, like you'll start seeing overlaps of like a bunch of aircraft on top of each other, which you don't want. And so you want to make sure that you only use one injector. And I recommend using the Beyond ATC. And the reason for that is if you just do the FSLTL injector, it will pull data from places like Flight Radar 24 and then move the aircraft around using actual flight data. But in the AI voice world, though, with Beyond ATC, if you want to hear other aircraft actually moving around or asking for pushback, or let's say that you're taxiing on a taxiway and the AI knows, or Beyond ATC knows, that you're actually on that taxiway, it'll tell them to stop for you, and then you'll notice that that airplane will stop and wait for you, etc. So that's one thing I like about Beyond ATC. So install FSLTL and then set your model matching priority to FSLTL. And even if you don't have AIG or FS traffic, you just set the priority like this, and then it'll honor FSLTL. The other setting down here is GSX integration. As you saw yesterday, like after I landed, GSX actually automatically opened and allowed me to taxi into the gate. And so having this 2 toggles, the departure handling and the arrival handling, checked, it just saves me 1 step of having to go up to the main menu and then clicking on the GSX button. So it does hallucinate sometimes, I will say that up front. So you might have to check to make sure that it is choosing the right gate, because after I took that video yesterday, I realized it was supposed to park at gate 4, but for some reason it was putting me at gate 6, and so it did hallucinate. And we need to set the GSX to the right gate, otherwise you get that kind of like overlap. I noticed. Did you notice that there were actually 2 ground marshalers on that screen? If you go back to the video, you can actually see there's 2 of them there. And that's why I noticed that the tow truck was actually in a weird position, like it was way up front. So little things like that, it'll kind of get quirky. So if you do start seeing stuff like this, just make sure you go back and change it manually. All right. One last thing that I will note about the Beyond ATC setup before we actually start, make sure that traffic is on if you want that FSLTL traffic to get injected. And then for you, I think maybe you can try using a higher density of parked aircraft, departure aircraft, arrival aircraft, and en route. This is a setting, unfortunately, that I have to use for FPS management. But I will say it gets really noisy and hard to talk if you actually set the density really high. So when you're first starting off, you probably want to have a very little density so that you're the only one talking. And then once you start getting used to it and you really want to see more aircraft and you want to get mixed in with the traffic, I would do that. But you're going to have to wait to talk, because people do try to step all over each other, and then you can't get your transmission through, which is just like real world, right? But yeah, unfortunately, the AI talks a lot slower, so it is frustrating having to wait to listen to all the readbacks and whatnot. So just a little pointer there. All right. Enough talking. Let's go ahead and get set up. So I will come back in a moment after I have turned on the aircraft. All right, so we're back, and I think the first thing we'll do before we start boarding everybody is I'll just show you how the traffic will get injected. So I'm just gonna keep this blown up here. We'll go today with let's give local again another try. Yesterday I went with the basic, but let's see how local actually is. It sounded very American to me, but let's see if like all of the other pilots and other ground staff, like air traffic controller, ground controllers, actually have a Japanese like voice. So let's go ahead and close this. I'm gonna log in to Beyond ATC. This might also take some time too, because it is downloading the flight plan from SimBrief. It is pulling down both the airports, and it's going to try to inject aircraft based on those preferences that you gave it for the density. And as soon as this finishes loading, you'll actually start seeing airplanes start popping up. So I'm gonna spin the view around here so you can kind of see. Maybe from this view here. Hopefully that should actually populate to make this world seem a little less empty. Again, this takes a little bit of time for Beyond ATC to load for airports that are much higher density to begin with. Like, if they have more gates and there are more flights, then it does take time. So that's why yesterday I chose like relatively small airports to demonstrate. And yep, building the path trees, and then it'll do the reticulating splines at the very end once this is done. There they are. And here we go. Takes about 10 to 30 seconds before you start actually seeing airplanes pop up. So don't worry, it's not broken. It's just kind of taking time as it's downloading real world data. And you'll notice that the time of day also matters. So if you start messing with like the time of day using the flight simulators weather control up here, it will start screwing with your AI traffic, and you actually might stop seeing traffic altogether. So in order for this to work really well, when you do your flight planning, make sure that you use the current time, as well as don't change the current time in your flight sim, and then that will actually keep all the aircraft that actually show up in here a lot more realistic, because it is really using the time of day. So like right now it's probably around 10 or 11 a.m. in Japan. We should see pretty high density of aircraft here in Osaka, because you know, usually it's a very busy time of day. You will see less traffic, like if you load yourself up at 2 a.m. or like at midnight. You know, don't be surprised that there's just less traffic at that time. Oh, okay, so we did get one aircraft to show up here. There's a JAL airplane sitting back there. There's a couple JAL airplanes sitting back here. So this is what we get if we have less traffic. There's a couple CRJs back there. No ANA aircraft. Okay, so if we are starting to see this and you don't really like what you're seeing, you can just go down again to your AI departure density, and let's just set park density to 8, just for the hell of it. And we'll go ahead and close. And then once you change the setting, you'll notice that like all the airplanes that you saw earlier disappear once, and then it'll reload the world again. So now you'll start seeing aircraft show up. Taking a little bit of time on the ANA side. There we go. So now we're starting to see ANA aircraft pop up. So as such. All right. Back in a second, and we'll go ahead and start looking at the boarding process again. Okay, let's go ahead and get GSX ready with the boarding process. So go ahead and click in here and request boarding.
Boarding requested.
Should get the jet bridge moving. And we should also see people coming down that jetway today. No tug.
Do you want to board crew?
Sure, why not? We'll do both today.
Pilot's boarding starting.
So in order to get all the jet bridges, you may actually see that there's some issues when you're setting up your airports and GSX. I don't know why there's this ghosting effect. That's really strange. Like there's a trail behind each person here. That's kind of weird, but let's spin this around. Let's see if that's... Maybe it's an effect of the smoked glass that they have on this jetway. Yeah, these jetways are actually a problem. You'll notice that sometimes they don't work at all. Like yesterday when we landed, you notice how there was a jet bridge there, but for some reason they used the air stairs instead. That part does take a lot of little experimenting and having to tweak the jetway files. So I would just stick with what you have, like airports that you know that work, and then try to avoid some of these like obscure airport files. To avoid that. Let's go back into the cockpit. And I've got the ANA boarding music playing right now.
Your crew has boarded. Passengers boarding starting.
Hopefully the cabin. Oh no, I don't have a cabin announcement for ANA. For the boarding sequence. All right, we'll just let that finish. I'll come back as soon as we're ready for takeoff. Okay, as promised, I will show you now the StreamDeck by itself and how we can actually set this guy up, how to use that. So the first thing you're going to need to do is you need to download the Axis and O's by Lorby. So if you search Lorby X's and O's. It's I guess a play on X's and O's, but Axis and O's, also known as AAO in the flight sim world. You'll see the website for Axis and O's. I think it's a British guy, somebody in the UK that made this, but you need to go ahead and buy this, download it. I think there's a freeware, like a demo version that works for maybe like 10 minutes or something, just to make sure that it works. So yeah, you can download this. It's a little kind of clunky, so read through the instructions very carefully. Let me know if you have any problems. But yeah, the first time I tried to do it didn't work for me, so you'll need to follow this carefully. Once you get that up and installed, make sure you buy it, otherwise it's gonna shut off after like 10 minutes or I think an hour or something like that. Just put in the key, and then that should unlock it for you. And what you want to use in order for this to appear is, this is an actual custom panel, or how should I put it? It's a StreamDeck profile made by a guy named Tony Aviation. So you'll need to go to flightsim.to and let's see, under others, there is a category, I think there was something called like StreamDeck profiles down here. Click on that, and then you'll see a whole bunch of different ones by different people. I've downloaded almost every single one that I could think of, just Boeing related ones, and I couldn't find anything that looked better than Tony's. So look for Tony Aviation 737, and then you'll see this guy over here, the SD Plus, StreamDeck Plus, PMDG 737 StreamDeck Plus profile by Tony. And he has a couple versions of it, but this one, I think, this is for 777. So we want the 737. And if you end up, expanding to Airbus in the future, he's got Airbus ones that look more like the Airbus. So I'm just gonna stick with this one. I love how he's taken photo, he's an actual pilot. He's taken actual photos of these cockpit instruments and then modeled them into the StreamDeck. So once you download this and then go through your StreamDeck Plus configurator here. Sorry, let me turn off the FPS meter. You'll notice I've got that StreamDeck Plus profile for large turned on, and the difference between large and the small is that when you go to the this panel here, these numbers are larger. There's two versions. There is a small version like this, or that large version. I prefer the small. So for me, I will end up using the small today. Okay, you really don't need to tinker with this other than just loading it in, and then it should show up over here. If Axis and O's isn't running, then none of these will work. They'll actually look blank. So getting that to work did take a little bit of experimentation for me at first, but don't give up. keep trying, and if you run into any problems, just let me know, and then I can kind of help troubleshoot with you. All right, so once that's set up, let's go ahead and take a look at what we can do inside here. So the first menu that you'll see at the very top is this here. So you've got the what looks like the autopilot panel, right? If you look at all these numbers here, 162 and a 10,000, you'll notice that we've got those set here as well. So like I said earlier, you could actually do everything all in one with this StreamDeck profile without having to use the autopilot or the EFIS over here, and some of the functions of the overhead. And the principal philosophy behind how Tony set this up was As a pilot, he's only put in all of the things, the bare minimum that you would need in order to fly into the StreamDeck here. So here's his logic. So for the autopilot, we can set speed. It takes a little bit of time just for it, the first time for it to come up, but it is actually pretty fast. So we can set our airspeed in here. The push button actually doesn't do anything here, but you notice how there is the changeover button here, which we have. Any button that you see here, you should be able to tap on it, and then it could do the changeover for you. Like for example, the heading one. If I touch this, you notice how it's moving. So there are some buttons that are touch sensitive, and some of them are actually toggles. So like for this one, you've got your heading selector here, but this, oh, I know why this is actually doing this. Normally this would actually toggle this to like from, what are we at, 20 to 25 to 30, but it's actually fighting with my actual autopilot over here. That's why if I change the knob over here, see, that's why it's actually reflecting the real state of the sim. So I wouldn't use it for this purpose since we already have the autopilot, but I'm just kind of showing you, you could do it over here. Altitude, we can set it here, and you'll notice that it's also changing over on my wind wing panel. And then vertical speed, you could also set if you have the VS button turned on. So in order to do all of that, that would actually be over in the MCP. So tap on MCP, and then you'll start seeing all the buttons like you do on your actual wind wing, the VNav, LNav, the command button, level change, heading select, vertical speed, and your approach buttons. So let's tap on VNav. Nope, we don't have a VNav loaded in there. I don't think we can actually get any of these to light up right at the moment. Maybe heading select, yeah. So heading select, we can actually. So that works. All right. Let's go back to overhead. So today I only actually used 2 of these screens anymore. Well, actually 3. But the overhead is the main one that I use, and that again is only focusing on the very bare minimum of switches that you would need to get kind of flying. As I showed you yesterday, the APU one is definitely one that I love to use, because having to toggle the APU twice using a mouse, kind of down and then down, is painful. So what he's done is he's actually set this up in a way where one tap goes between on and off. And if you want to go to start, he's actually triggered this as a long press. So you do 1, on, and then you do a long press, and then that would actually get it to actually start. Now right now I don't think, do we have? Oh yeah, my APU is already on at the moment, and it's ready to trigger. So let's look at other stuff here. Engine anti-ice you can set here. You can do the fasten seatbelt signs on and off. So some people have asked, what's the difference between auto and on? I actually saw a really good video of a 747-8 pilot here in Japan explain the difference, and so I'll share that with you. So what auto does is under 10,000 feet, the seatbelt sign will remain on, and then at 10,000, it will automatically turn it off. And so you heard the cabin announcement yesterday as we were landing, trigger the fasten seatbelt sign to have the passengers also sit down. So nice to have the auto so you don't have to think about it when you're transitioning. Also, it's a nice indicator to me, it's a reminder to me that I need to do all of those things for landing, like turning on the landing lights, the taxi lights, setting the engine ignition to continuous, and then other things that I'll show you. Ignition for the, sorry, not ignition, the position lamp. This needs to be set to steady whenever your aircraft is on. The only time you would ever turn it off is if you turned your whole airplane off and you're done for the day. But anytime your aircraft is on and you're in the cockpit, you want to make sure that those are on. That'll show the left and right green and red lights on the tips of your wings. And then strobe and steady will only be used when you're actually flying. So the moment you're ready to take off, you want to set that to strobe and steady. And then once you land, you also want to turn it off and back to the steady state. The dome light is actually really something cool that you could use to help lighten up your overhead panel, but this is usually used in the dark scenario. So today, right now, we're still during the daylight, so we're not going to use that. But there are two settings. You've got the dim and you have the bright. This is a lifeline for me. Like, for example, right after I landed in a dark airport or in a dark scenario, then I want to turn this thing on using the StreamDeck so that I can actually see the overhead to switch the APU, or sorry, the ground power on, so that I can then start the deboarding process. And also during night operations to turn the aircraft on, I'll use that. The flashlight is another item that I talked about yesterday, which might be useful for you. That is actually, I think it's left, is it Alt-L? Yeah, Alt-L is this flashlight. I don't know if you can see it here, but if you're in the dark, tapping Alt-L will turn the flashlight on, and you can then, as you move around the cabin, you'll notice that the flashlight is actually pointing at what you're looking at. Kind of hard to see here because it's light. But yeah, that's how you navigate around when you're in the dark. All right, moving on. So let's move to, we did the brightness controls earlier, and again, to toggle between like a multi-state one, you just tap on the wheel here. And same thing with our altitude. If we want to set the cabin pressure altitude, we just spin the wheel here. It defaults on the top one for the flight altitude, and if you want to switch to the landing altitude, just tap and then the white dot comes down here, and then you can set the landing altitude here, and that'll change these values here. So normally you'd have to do this manually in here.
Japan Air 2331, ready for IFR clearance to Oki. Japan Air 2331, Osaka delivery. Expect runway 14 right, Tiger 2 departure, Asaji transition. Squawk 1563. Tiger 2 departure, Asaji transition. Squawk 1563, Japan Air 2331.
Yeah,
Japan Air 2331, read back correct.
these voices sound very American. Definitely not as Japanesey as
Contact ground 121.71, ready for pushback or engine start. Japan Air 2331, thanks.
they do sound more human, that's for sure. But yeah, I wanted something that sounds a little bit more Asian. You'll see why. I wanted to try to match with all of the cabin attendants' voices on the universal announcer. So, all right, moving on. We did MCP, we did overhead. I guess the next one is EFIS. So here, all of the commands that we have on this guy are illustrated down here. So if I wanted to do, for example, the minimums, if I want to set between radio or barometric altimeter, I can then set that down here. So barometric altimeter, and as I set this, well, this is going to be a little bit hard to show you unless so actually, maybe I could do it with this. So
all aircraft be advised, information Julie, yet now current, QNH 1027.
So I'm spinning the barometric altimeter here. So as I spin this, you'll see that my hectopascals are going up and down. In the US, you would be using millimeters mercury. So if you want to switch, you just tap on the button here to inches. And now your display is now in millimeters mercury or inches mercury. And that's how you change that setting. The tapping on the button here is the actual standard button. So here, if you once you cross your transition altitude, which is in Japan typically 14,000 feet. I think in the US it might be even lower, like 6,000 feet. The ATC, beyond ATC, will actually tell you what your transition altitude is. And what that is that you'll notice I push the button for standard and inches mercury. What this is it's for when you're landing. It tells you how high you are off the ground based on the local air pressure at the airport. So if I were to set this to like 30, you'll notice that now it's registering my altitude here locally on the ground is 120 feet. So when you're doing your minimums at plus 500 feet from ground, you would see 620 feet as your indicator. But if you had your millimeters mercury set wrong, you might actually hit the ground because you might be negative. So this is where you want to make sure that having quick access to this during the descent is really important. So this is one that I used to use before I got my EFISs. I'd use this a lot to set it up for my landing and then making sure that that's correct. Now, once you cross that transition altitude, you want to set this to standard. And that way you're not using the local airport's information anymore, because once you're in the air, it really doesn't matter. And everybody needs to use a standard altitude in order to avoid hitting each other in the air. And so you'll notice that the altitude here will actually light up in yellow when you need to change over. So when we're in the air and we're at above 14,000 feet, it'll flash yellow for that hectopascals or the inches mercury. And then once it turns yellow, you just tap the button and then it'll switch to standard. And then the standard should be in green when you're in the mode that you're supposed to be in. All right. Next one is the traffic and the range indicator. So that's one thing that's different on the Max version. The Max actually doesn't have the static ranges set on the wheel, so this actually spins freely. But this is actually a profile for a 737NG. So if I were to spin this guy around, it's changing the range between 5 and 640, which reflects over here on the map. I don't have a map loaded right now, but it's exactly the same as over here, so between 5 and 640. And then while we're looking at this, I think the next one is going to be the actual map mode. So what we just saw right now, the setting between map, plan, VOR, and approach modes. So those you'll see over here when we toggle them. There's map and there's plan. Sorry, I don't have anything loaded in there yet because I don't have my positions turned on. The IRSs aren't activated yet. And then that center button that I showed you to display the vertical situation display. So if you tap the center button, right now, sorry, nothing loaded, so we can't see it, but it is the same thing as if I were to tap on that actual center button that was on the map over here. Same thing. The traffic button was also, that's the one that's right here. So you can turn the traffic mode on. And then on the left-hand side here, we've got our minimums. So you can set your minimums down here. So if you have a barometric minimum versus a radio minimum, when I fly category 3 landings, I have to have my radio altimeter set to 50, otherwise it will not do an auto land. You may have to make sure that that's showing and it's turned on. Also, if you want to do barometric minimums, then you will just go here and then tap this from radio to baro, and now your minimums will show here as baro, and then you can set your barometric minimum based on the altitude of the airport. Okay. Other buttons, so all the ones that you see down here, weather, station, waypoint, airport, data, position, terrain, those ones are illustrated here. There is actually one missing on this version where the MCP button is showing up. So if you download the latest Tony Aviation version, he's actually got this one missing. So I have several versions of his profile still on here. So 1.3 has the position button, I think, still on here. So this mimics all of the buttons. But I think a lot of pilots actually wanted to have a quick button to go back to the MCP. And so he made a new version of 1.4, which puts the MCP button here and said, sorry, it wasn't the position. Which one's missing? Let's see, weather, station, airport. It's the waypoint one. Waypoint is missing. You really don't use this one as much because all the waypoints that you need are inside your flight plan already, but there are times when you want to have like additional waypoints visible. That's if you wanted to like do a diversion route, or if they tell you to hold at a certain waypoint, then you might want to be able to see the waypoints here on the screen. But I never really use that. The ones that I mostly use are going to be the weather and the terrain, and then data. Data is useful for taking a look at what time you're going to reach a certain waypoint, and that'll show up on your navigation display. All right, so that's EFIS. Now moving over to FWD. It's the forward control panel. This one I use a lot even today. Couple ones that are very useful is the master caution warning light. So when that thing is on, and if I want to turn it off, I can actually turn it off with one click here, like that. Very useful. Auto toga, I never touch this, honestly. It's just there. I don't really know which button that's actually pushing on the real aircraft, so I kind of stay away from that. Auto throttle we have on our WinWing autopilot, so we don't really need this. It's just that switch. Obviously, it's not going to turn it on for you, but the auto throttle arm button does turn on and off with that. The flight director is also.
TCAS test failed.
Sorry, I think I accidentally tapped the TCAS. Let's see, so this is flight director for the pilot and then co-pilot, but we have those physical switches here, so you don't need to use these. This one's actually really useful, the MFD engine and system. And what that does is, let me show you over here how that looks. So right now, the default is that the engine MFD is turned on with this button here, and that's the small, I forgot what they call this, like the center display or the standby display. So if I tap this, it cycles between, this is the standard mode where you see only the N1 and the EGT information here. And if I wanted to turn on like more information like oil pressure, oil temp, then you tap that MFD engine button once and it'll display here on the sub display. It won't show it on the primary, but if you want this information to show up here, tap it one more time and now you'll see them as text show up. So now we have the N2, the oil pressure, and the oil temp. I like to keep it this way because what I want to use the downstairs screen for is the system MFD. It's called multifunction display, MFD. And I'll tap the system button over here. And what that does is it's going to show me this guy here. And I don't have that display popped out over here because it's not one that I really need to use all the time, but what I use it for, and I think I showed you yesterday, is to check the flight controls. So when you're checking flight controls, you can do up and down, left and right, and you'll notice that my yoke is moving real slow right now. As I turn my yoke side to side, up and down. The reason, I thought this was a bug at first, but then it made sense to me. I don't have my hydraulic pressure turned on. So my hydraulic pumps, if they're off, obviously these aren't going to move. And so when you start up the aircraft, make sure that you've got your hydraulic pumps turned on, otherwise these will move very, very slowly. Okay. And then down here, we've got our TCAS as well as our transponder settings. So setting the transponder, you can set from 0 to 7. And then you set each number by tapping. So tap to move to the next one. So if I wanted to do, like, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, I'll do 1, tap, 2, tap, -1, 3, and then -2, 4. And you could tap ident if you want. I don't know if this does anything, but when they tell you to change your transponder and squawk whatever code, as soon as you set it, the Beyond ATC will actually respond back. I think we had that happen yesterday when we changed the squawk, and it actually did switch over. Okay, next is TCAS. So for TCAS, we want to make sure that our transponder is set to the alt reporting off, sorry. That's what we keep it on the ground. That will let the air traffic controllers know that you're active. So that's what I learned from some of the videos. So we want to keep it in this mode when you're on the ground. When you're taxiing, you want to set it to TA only. Sorry, I mentioned this was TXRX yesterday. This is not. It's not transmit receive. It's TA for traffic advisory and RA, which is resolution advisory. And so traffic advisory will just tell you traffic on the screen. And that's useful because if you're on the ground and you have it on resolution, let's say there's other aircraft around you, it might tell you to descend or ascend to avoid those aircraft, which is annoying because you don't want to do that. TARA, the resolution advisory, should only be used in the air. So that's the thing that we'll set right before takeoff. We'll set it to TARA and then we'll take off. And then once you're on the ground, you also want to be on either TA when you're taxiing, and then if you're at the gate, you want to make sure you're at the alt reporting off. Okay. Next is the auto brakes. So again, this is a very useful one during takeoff and landings. During takeoffs and landings, we'll use the different modes here. For takeoff, we want to use the RTO, which is the rejected takeoff, and then you'll see that orange light for the RTO shows up here. It's also indicated over here. So if I turn this, it will turn the knob, and then you've got 1, 2, 3, and max, which you can use. I think for most cases we'll use 2 or 3 for like a regular short runway, and then if it's during rainy conditions, you'll want to use max so that you get the maximum braking on your landing. But in the real world, it seems like pilots will try to use a lighter setting, and the reason for this is because the brake temperature will go up when you choose a higher auto brake, and they do have regulations in place for like short turnaround. So if you're doing like a quick turn at an airport, then your brake temperature needs to come down fast enough in order to be able to take off again. And so they really do want to save on the brake temperature. So again, it's more real world stuff. For us in the simulator, it doesn't really matter, but that's the reason why they have the various settings here. And also the level of manual braking that you'll use with your rudder also comes into play in the real world. Lastly, we have the course settings here, which we have right here. So if I spin this guy around, you can set the course for the co-pilot with the second one, and then you can set the captain's one with the top one. So that can be done here. All right. Now for our two other ones that your favorite one, which is the comms. So you can have your radio panel here. This is your VHF 1 and your VHF 2. For how to set this is...
Sorry, let me
turn the volume down.
All Nippon 22 Osaka delivery. Expect.
Yeah, all of these voices sound too American to me. In order to set the standby, the active will never change based on these wheels. So the standby is the only one that will change. The left-hand number is for be on the left-hand side of the decimal point. So this will set whole numbers. So let's say like 121.6, I will set 121. And then for the 6, I can go up and down here. This sets the right-hand side. And this gives you that 3 digits of control that you mentioned that we didn't have with the other one. That's the difference between the Vox one and the data one. So 121.65 we can also set, or 625 we can even set in here. And then in order to swap that into the active, we just push this one. This is the transfer button. So it'll switch between standby and active for VHF1. Same thing for VHF2. Set this like this. Pushing the buttons here won't do anything. You just have to tap this guy. So just these 2 buttons and these 4 dials is what you would use. Likewise for the navigation, when you're setting your ILS frequency or VOR frequencies, you will set the standby for nav1 over here, whole numbers, and then decimals over here with 2 digits, and then transfer to bring that into the active. So 11390, we'll bring that over, same thing. And that is your radio and your nav. Let's see, last one is the conf, or the configuration page. Again, this is one that it was nice. I mean, if I were to fly the 737 in this mode, so sometimes I'll do it like this, where I'm hiding all of the panels and I'm just looking outside. So I have my instruments in front of me like this. I've got my autopilot. What I can't see is I can't see like my flap settings, and so you could use the StreamDeck to watch your flaps here. And if we didn't have this guy, so if I'm, so now you can see I have flap 5 set, and then my hydraulic pressure isn't actually on right now, so it's not moving, but you can see which one I've selected here with the indicator. I think this is a pretty cool option to be able to use, but again, having to cycle back and forth between these pages can get a little bit cumbersome. So lately I've been kind of flying with this view like such, where I'm just hiding the PFD and the ND, and I'll leave just the flaps, the gear, the auto brake, and also my speed brake. So when I set my speed brake to armed, you'll see that light turn on there. So this view for me kind of substitutes for this guy here. But again, speed brake, for example, if the speed brake is armed, I could also see them here. And that's what this is good for. Landing gear as well. We've got the 3 green. If I push up, you'll see the, I don't think it shows the red correctly. See, so this is an invalid state where if you're on the ground and then you pull up your landing gear, you'll see green and red. That's not illustrated here on this display. But you can also use this to set your landing gear up and down. All right. So yeah, that's everything. Lots of stuff you can do with the StreamDeck. I would recommend you go buy one, find a used one, get that Axis and O's on there. I think this will give you a lot of the features that you want and you need immediately out of the box. So if you don't have, say, the EFIS, this is very useful. Not having to go and change your view to the God, what am I? I'm blanking out here. Sorry, the overhead panel. You know, you'll have the bare minimums that you need. And also with the radios, though, what I'll tell you is the comms one, what's nice is the Beyond ATC is already automatically configured to change the radio frequencies for you, so that's kind of the co-pilot's job. And that allows you to actually do more of the flying, and the co-pilot will automatically change the stuff for you, so you don't really have to do it manually. I get kind of lazy, but if you really wanted to, you could turn that setting off in the configuration over here and do all of the radios manually. So you can have fun with that. Give it a try. Let's take a little break, and we'll then move over to AI in the next section. AI beyond ATC.